Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Evolving HR webinar. This one is a topic that I'm not qualified to talk about in any way, but I have experienced some of it in some ways. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more of an expert perspective on this. But we're going to be talking about menopause in the workplace today, and not just in terms of the employees that you're responsible for potentially going through menopause, but also you yourself as an HR professional, because a number of us have experienced those symptoms whilst in an HR role. And I think any time that we have something that makes life difficult, it's a little bit harder when you work in HR, because you're supposed to be the one that provides solutions for everybody else. You're not supposed to be the one that has issues yourself. So if you're listening in today, if you want to ask a question, pop it in the chat. If you want to just say hello and let us know where you're dialing in from, then please also do that. I will keep an eye on the chat. I'll try and bring in your questions as and when I can. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask my lovely panel to introduce themselves. So Louise, shall we start with you? Thank you for joining me today, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you,
Sound like a game show host.
Well, my name's Louise Griffiths. I have a background in HR of coming up 30 years, which I can't quite believe, but it's true. I'm also a Chartered Fellow of the CIPD. So I think for me, I worked as a head of HR in an organisation for several years, coming up sort of 9 years. Then I started experiencing the menopause, which I didn't know what it was. And I talked quite openly about the fact that I was the head of HR. I didn't know what was happening. It took over a year for someone to say to me, do you think this might be hormone related? By this time, I'd taken time off work. I came back in a part-time adjusted role. My company was very supportive. Nobody knew the word menopause. So eventually I went to the doctor at age 45, told you're a bit young to be menopausal, and was prescribed antidepressants. So in a nutshell, basically, I ultimately had to leave my job because I just could not make it work. And that was 4 years ago. And after going on to HRT, that's really what sorted me out in terms of getting back to where I was. But I am that 1 in 10% of women that have left the workplace because of their menopause. I still actively work as an HR consultant now. I also run my own business, coaching women to stay in the workplace with the menopausal symptoms. And I also deliver training workshops to organisations, managers, staff, just to get that word out there about how to get support. So thank you.
Wow. And I'll the full disclosure, I've known Louise for, 21 years. We worked together back in 2004 in an HR department when we were both young and carefree, and yes, menopause was still so far away for us then.
Happy days.
Happy days. Angela, thank you for joining me today. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us, Kirsty. Yes, well, I have a fairly similar story to Louise, really, although I don't have an HR background at all. My background is in fashion retailing. I was product merchandising director. I did that for 25 years and thought I absolutely loved it. And then I got made redundant in COVID for the second time, which was probably a blessing. But my life then started turning itself upside down. So I was 42 and I was slowly going downhill in terms of rising anxiety, losing my confidence, not really knowing what I wanted, who I was. And I just let this spiral. Obviously, it was COVID, didn't really want to go to the doctors, couldn't really go to the doctors. So I was ignoring what was happening. And 2 years down the line, after I'd started a fabulous new contracting role for an amazing brand that I was so excited about, and within probably a week or two of starting that job, totally crashed. And I cried every day for 3 months and completely lost me as a human being. Did not know how to turn up just to be myself, let alone how to turn up and do a good job in a new job. And I ended up leaving that role after 3 months. How I stuck it out for 3 months is beyond me. I finally got myself to the doctors. And the only reason that I got myself to the doctors was partly my mum, who suggested perimenopause. And by this time I was 44 and I was in complete denial when my mum mentioned it. I was like, it can't be, I'm too young. And I associated with menopause with being in your 50s. And I had an older sister showing no signs whatsoever. But the one thing that made the difference for me, once I started researching a little bit, once my mum mentioned the word, was night sweats. So some night sweats started happening, and then I started to join the dots and started to question myself, got to the doctors. I also was offered antidepressants at first, but refused them. And I was lucky, and she did actually just put me on HRT. And like you, Louise, it allowed the fog to lift, is how I describe it. Within 2 weeks, I started to feel a bit more human, and I stopped crying for no apparent reason. And that's when I started my coaching journey. So I am now a full-time mindset and menopause coach, and I work with women from all different sectors with their menopause symptoms, and also go into organisations and help them. And I'm more on the one-to-one side of coaching people, helping them understand their symptoms, what they can do to help themselves, and coaching through the anxiety and the lack of confidence. So that's where Louise and I slightly differ with how we work with our clients.
Do you know, it's before I get on to the questions, it's really interesting that you both said that you were told that you were too young and you were offered antidepressants. Same here. So my symptoms started the other way around, Angela. My night sweats started when I was 40. I'm going to be 52 in 2 weeks, and I still have them. Oh God, 12 years of night sweats. And, you know, okay, we're talking about menopause, and I'm not going to get graphic, but my periods are still regular as bloody clockwork. Like, they are showing no signs of buggering off at all. Every month I pray that it's just going to be like, will this be the month that it'll be 20 days late? Like, can I please have some irregular, like, just bugger off now.
You know what I say, Kirsty? I think I'm exactly the same. I think my ovaries, everyone's like, oh, let's have another go. Come on. You know, it's literally like, come on. I'm 6 years in now and I'm still going.
The crazy thing is as well, is like, I've always known that I didn't want to be a mum. And so I'm like, I never even needed any of it anyway. So,
me too.
Why am I so punished for this? Anyway, my anxiety and my lack of confidence and all of that sort of thing. And for me, it was mood swings that were gradually, it was like a pendulum. And every couple of months, they were getting darker and darker and darker. And it got to the point where my moods were so bleak that I kind of broke down and I went to the doctor. But that was only 2 years ago. So I'd had the night sweats and, you know, for a very long time. And then I had a complete crash about 2 years ago. And at that point, I was put on HRT, but I was also put on antidepressants, and I'm still on both now because I have no idea which of them is working better, but I'm not prepared to go without one of them to find out. So I still take both just because it's like, now I feel like me again. So I'm taking that. But yeah, anyway, that's all I'm going to share about my bloody menopause journey. So let's talk about it from a workplace perspective. And again, it's interesting and heartbreaking to me that you both left corporate careers because of your menopause symptoms. I was already self-employed at the point that mine really started to affect me day to day. Obviously, night sweats, they make you tired if you've been awake in the night, but they don't affect you at work in the same way. What do you think, like when employees are going through menopausal symptoms at work, what are some of the barriers that they face? And, you know, what can HR departments do to help kind of break those barriers down? Angela, I'll ask you first.
I think one of the biggest barriers is lack of awareness on everybody's part. This is we all have to take responsibility for learning about our bodies and what's going to happen to us. And I think, you know, when you're in your 20s and 30s, the last thing you're going to think about is the word menopause. You turn off. But I think that understanding and awareness of what is coming is one of the biggest things that will change how we move forward. And trying to get that education out there to women before it happens to us is going to be the game changer. But it's still quite a taboo subject. And I don't know about you, Louise, but, you know, we're talking about this all the time. But something that I feel is the eye roll. Still get the eye roll every time you try and bring up the word menopause, and people just really don't want to know about it. You're either really into the conversation and you want to learn, or the word just makes you go, ooh, and you just don't want to know. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of organisations. And then what happens is just surface stuff to try and tick a box. But we're not actually getting into the real detail that people actually need and what's going to make a difference. So I think, you know, from what HR can do about that, that is about making sure you're taking it seriously. And that's about getting your senior leadership team on board with the conversation, because if it's just coming from HR, you know, that can be a bit of an uphill struggle if you haven't got you know, finance on side to actually give you a budget to do something half decent, rather than just putting on a 1 hour lunch and learn. That great, we want to have those lunch and learns because that's starting the awareness, but it's just the beginning.
Lou,
I think it's about culture as well. I think it's about people starting to talk about it, and the eye roll. I've had people eye rolling or even sniggering, or that everybody's talking about that. Well, there's a reason for that. And I think also it's about businesses. I take your point as well, Andrew. I think I don't want younger women to be fearful and think it's going to be awful, because actually it won't, because by the time it comes to their menopause, they'll know exactly, it's like starting puberty, they'll know exactly what's happening. But it's organisations, I think, that have a culture of the tick box, lunch and learn. You know, when I deliver training, I like to think, we know what's happened afterwards. What have you done? You know, what happened after? Oh, we had someone come to talk to us. And you think, great. You know, I had 2 people that I know of say, 2 men went home and spoke to their wives and said, this sounds like you. I'm worried about you. You know, it affects men as well. But actually, I think organisations need to have that culture to start talking about it, to actually give people permission, because there's a lot of people really struggling that don't want to come forward for fear of being judged.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Now, I think I knew nothing. Like I said, I'm just about to turn 52. I knew nothing about it. I honestly think that if it wasn't for Davina McCall and that blooming documentary, which was 3-4 years ago now, we wouldn't be, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing, because I don't think there weren't many people that did what you do until that happened. Honestly, Davina McCall should be made a dame for bringing this to the attention of the wider public. And you're absolutely, what you just said, Lou, of course it affects everybody, because it can change us as people. So those of us that live with others, whether it's a spouse, whether it's our kids, whether we have flatmates, they're going to experience and notice those changes in us. You are going to notice and experience changes in your colleagues, in people that report to you, in people that you report to. Like anybody in your office who has the potential to go through menopause, it's going to have an impact. It's very rare that we do just get away with the, you know, quiet little hot flush, but only when I'm in the loo, or only at the weekend so no one sees it. It's one of those
things. It doesn't work like that.
No, absolutely doesn't. And you cannot not bring it to work. It's like if you broke your ankle, that plaster is on your ankle 24/7 until it's ready to come off. This just lasts a decade.
And can I just make the point as well that it isn't just the symptoms that you're bringing to work. It's that whole wider effect of those symptoms. Because when you suddenly aren't who you were anymore, and you're irritable and you're angry and you're shouting or you're crying, and your partner doesn't know what to do about it, and then you get, you know, we're talking, this is causing divorce here. I mean, I don't mean to be dramatic about it. And there are lots of
the highest divorce rate at the moment in the UK is women in menopausal age.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's the highest divorce rate at the moment of divorce in the UK, women in menopausal age. A lot of them have had enough.
I have spoken to at least 3 chaps in the last year or 2 who had, because I've been quite open about menopause on LinkedIn, or I certainly was a year or so ago until I got myself sorted, who asked if they could chat to me confidentially. And I'm not a menopause coach. As I said, they were just like, Kirst, can I just have a chat with you as a friend? I think this is what my wife's going through. And I don't know, it's doing, like, our relationship's changing. I don't like it. I don't know who she is anymore. And we had a really good conversation. I remember saying to both of them, like, she's probably absolutely terrified, because she knows that she's not who she used to be. She doesn't know why it's happening to her. She doesn't know what to do about it. And in both cases, luckily, they were both really nice chaps. They went away, and one of them actually went and bought Davina's book and took it home to her and said, I think you need to read this. And we only had like a coffee chat. There was one chap, I was on a training course, and it was when we had a breakout session. He said, can I just ask you about this? It was nothing to do with the course that we were on. He was like, but can I just ask you about this? Because I've seen that you talk about it. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, massive impact. When we think about that in a work context, if that's the biggest cause of divorce, that's a relationship at home. Have you seen, does it often get mistaken for poor performance or, not doing your job very well or those sorts of things? Have you seen that happen to people? Does it have that kind of, almost work divorce effect? Sorry, go on, Lou, you go. Yeah.
I've coached people who are basically really struggling. They keep going off sick and they've got a heavy period and they're hiding at home. If they're working from home, what's happening? And I find actually it's senior women as well. I almost liken it to a triangle. The more senior they get, the more isolated they feel because they don't know who they can trust. Who can I talk to? Actually, I've got peers, but I'm not going to tell them I'm not okay. And then, once they put the seed out there, they can feel that, and I know myself, mine was anxiety and panic attacks. And I'd be sat in senior leadership room thinking I'm not okay. And I didn't know who on earth to say, I'm not all right. I just excused myself, went to the loo or something. I thought, oh my God, I remember this thought in my head, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I don't know. I've lost my identity. And, like Andrew said, you just carry on, keep going, because you don't know what else to do. But Andrew and I were similar. We didn't know what it was. If we knew it was menopausal, I'd have done something about it. Yeah. So it's really hard, actually. But if you don't know what it is, that's the thing. There's two sides. If you don't know, then you're a bit lost. You probably need someone to hold your hand and say, actually, this is what it might be. It's just what happened to me. But if you do know and you're struggling, let's think about all the symptoms that people frankly don't want to talk about. Loss of libido, heavy periods, vaginal dryness. Where do we start with it? These are ones that people do not want to talk to their colleagues about or their boss. Highly personal. It's difficult. And I've never had a hot flash. I say that I've never had one.
Oh, right.
Someone at work said to me, you can't be menopausal, you're not having hot flashes. Oh, that was that sort of knowledge. I don't know what's going on here, but actually every single person has different symptoms, and that's to remember as well. Everybody's different. No one's got the same set textbook as to what to do, but Davina's book is very good.
Yeah, it kind of covers everything. So plugging Davina McCall here unintentionally, but
and in terms of what the impact that I just want to share something that happened towards the end of last year with a client that I started working with. And she was a senior leader. She was not on the senior team at the time, but she knew she should be. But she was suffering with a massive knock of confidence. She knew she was menopausal, but she was not going to talk about it to anybody. But the lady in HR contacted me and said, I want to offer this lady some coaching, and I feel like you're the right person because I know that she will be menopausal, but I can't get her to open up about it. And I don't want to push her. And so I offered to have a chat with her. And I was the first person that she was able to open up with, talk about her symptoms with, and let go and shed a tear with me and really, open up about what was going on for her in the workplace. And within 4 months of us working together, she is a completely different woman and got promoted. And it's just that ability to notice it in somebody, get them the help that they need, and to have that safe space, to have that conversation. Just being able to talk about it is one of the best things you can do to start helping your symptoms, that you're not holding it all in.
One of the comments that somebody's put in the chat is Vicky said, I'd love to know how to support or coach senior leadership team or line managers to have sensitive conversations. Now, in the example that you just gave, Angela, that HR professional made a decision to bring in somebody with outside expertise, but there is still that whole issue around getting line managers to understand, this person isn't neglecting their duties, they're not performing badly. So would love to know what your thoughts are on that. I'll come to you first, Lou, on that.
Thank you. I mean, I've done a lot of training with line managers around the menopause, and I always use an example, and my friend's partner would go, "You're not telling that story again." He works in a big finance company. He came home as a manager, big team, and he was given a menopause policy. That was it. And he came home and he literally said to her, quote, "I don't know how to talk to women in their 50s about their periods." And she was like, "What? That's not what it's all about. Not just about, women in their 50s and their periods." He had no idea whatsoever. He was terrified of someone coming to talk to him because all he had was his policy, no knowledge whatsoever. And I think that's wrong. What they should have done is actually had a conversation with line managers. Like I do, I present training and say, look, as a line manager, you're not expected to know all the answers. These are new conversations. You have a conversation with someone if they've had a bereavement or they've had time off work. It's an extension of a conversation, but it's understanding that individual. What do they need? How is it affecting them? And what do they need in terms of those reasonable adjustments? The classic, the desk fan in the office. But I've coached people who heavy periods. I'm similar to Angela. Actually, I had someone who's really, really struggling. She was on a fixed term contract, and she was also getting insomnia. So waking up early in the morning and actually thinking, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to be tired, and this whole cycle phoning in sick. But through the coaching, what she did do is she spoke to a line manager, got the support, and subsequently she was made permanent. So it just shows that line managers sometimes want to do the right thing, are worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. So giving them that education, but also for the line managers who are, well, I'm not going to have those conversations. My mantra as a head of HR, managers should be managing. And to be honest, if they're paid to manage, they need to have those skills. But coaching, mentoring, who in the business can actually support them have those conversations? Because that, I said to people, if you feel embarrassed about having that conversation, that employee is going to be 10 times more embarrassed than you will. So give them that space, give them that time. And actually line managers, an extension of their duties is actually to support that person. If you're having someone who's off sick a lot, what's going on? Have a conversation with them. And actually, if you can keep that person in the business, it's a conversation with someone.
And it doesn't have to be all the gory details, does it? They don't have to start telling you about, the things that you don't want to talk about. It could just be like, I've noticed that you don't seem to be yourself recently, or that you seem to be, more stressed, or that you seem to be late. Like, is everything okay? What do you need?
Yes.
So you don't even have to say, tell me what's going on with you. I want to hear all about your periods.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to say that. You don't even have to use the M word and say menopause. You just say, is there anything we can do to help? What do you need?
Yeah.
And I think that's a less scary conversation for people, surely, because it's like, oh, but what if they start telling me about things that I don't want to hear about? And that's a whole other conversation about how squeamish we are about something that the half of the population goes through every single month. But, another day.
The only thing I would add to that is only around the wording. And I tend to prefer, how can I help you? Because women, especially if they're struggling with brain fog, probably don't know what they need.
Yeah,
that's really fair. Yeah, that's really fair.
They probably don't know what they need, but being asked, what can I do to help you? You might just say, I need someone to talk to. And if they feel comfortable to talk to you, they might then open up. If not, it's okay. Well, who's the right person? Who do you feel comfortable talking to? Let me put you in front of them. Find out who it is you want to support you.
Yes,
that's it's if it's brain fog, I don't know what I need. It might be, I don't know that I'm perimenopausal. How do I find out? And so not knowing is a problem.
and I think for myself as well, in my experience, my company was very supportive of me and actually said, what is it you need? But I didn't know it was menopausal related. And I think it's for line managers as well. It's that understanding of that person is stuck. You are there to support them and guide them. But actually, if line managers don't know how to deal with it, then that's where HR do come in to actually say, let's help you with it. Because I think you don't want to lose that person in the business. I would say it's the person will be the go-to, the person that people have worked with for years. They're a trusted member of staff, everything else. And if they can't make it work, but once they go off sick, I think they go under the radar as well. I spoke to someone once, and I'm on a final written warning for my absence. And I'd been there, I think she'd been there over 10 years. So actually she became a problem in the end, as opposed to get someone to help and going down this disciplinary route. And I thought, that's wrong.
Yeah, it's back to front somehow, isn't it? So we've talked a little bit there about how line managers can have conversations. How can we make sure that they don't cock it up with some of these old-fashioned attitudes that people have and awkward silences? I mean, how do we make this less of an awkward conversation for people? Sorry, I should say, Angela, go on, you were going to speak.
I mean, I think the easiest way to make it less of an awkward conversation is for it to be culturally embedded in your organisation, that it's just something that we talk about here. It's just a normal part of a woman's life, and there is nothing to be embarrassed about. It's completely natural. And until you can bring that in culturally, that not just menopause, it might be menstrual cycles, it's anything that we're looking after, any kind of mental health support in the organisation. Menopause needs to be part of that bigger, wider conversation, which makes it feel normal, which takes away any embarrassment that comes up. Because a woman is never going to talk to her line manager and say, I'm having really painful sex and I don't know what to do about it. She's not going to do that. So line managers don't need to worry about that. Yeah. What they need to worry about is how do I make sure I can have a grown-up conversation with you that gets you the help and support that you need. And we're both grown-ups in the room and we both get it, because it's just life.
Yeah. I had a line manager once and he said to me, I've got a team of women, all remote. How do I tell them I'm here? And I said, tell them you've had this training and tell them you've got an open door. It's all you need to do. You know, sometimes don't overthink it. Yeah. You know, don't come and tell me about my periods. That's the thing, this guy, or how do I talk to women in their 50s about their periods? If you look at all the different symptoms people can have. And another thing to mention is often once people get themselves back on track like we did, it might be a short-term solution. Can you go in an adjusted role for 3 months? Is there something you could do? You've got a big presentation coming. Could you co-do it with someone else if you're not okay? 3 to 6 months as a sort of an adjustment rather than permanently reducing hours or whatever else can actually really help. Just sort of thinking about what they can do to support that person.
And that's the thing as well, isn't it? It's not a permanent state. And if you can get the right, I'm a big advocate for HRT because it's worked wonders for me, my mum, both my sisters. Once you get that right, you kind of go back to normal again. I mean, like I said, it's weird for me to even think back to 2 years ago now when I broke down, because I haven't felt like it since. So whatever I'm taking now is working and I feel like me and I'm able to function just like I used to. Don't know if that's a good thing or not. But one of the things, I think, Angela, you touched on this earlier because you were talking about tick box exercises. And Louise, you also mentioned the policy, that poor guy that had just been given a policy and sent home with it. Is there actually any use to formalizing menopause supporting policies? Because I know a lot of organizations are now writing menopause policies, or is that more the kind of token gesture over actually making a difference to people? What are your thoughts on that, Angela?
My answer to that is yes, they're absolutely worth having, but with a great big but afterwards. Because as with any policy for anything, it's no use in your drawer and nobody ever knowing it exists, and so it really can just very easily become a tick box exercise that you write it and then nobody ever hears of it ever again. So what was the point in doing it in the first place? So it's all about the follow-up. So yes, I definitely think you should have a policy. Actually, in my view, I don't know if you agree with me, Louise, I don't think it needs to be a standalone menopause policy. I prefer a wider well-being policy that includes everything, because it helps the culture of the organisation talk wider about what's going on for people within the organisation of all sexes. It doesn't matter who you are, we're supporting all of you, and the policy protects all of you, and we're following up with training, with manager training, with awareness, you know, and it might be adding in one-to-one services. And it's just about that following up with flexibility, and whatever's in your policy that you're explaining, and you have resources in there, make sure you can follow it up and actually, okay, well, it says in the policy I can do this. How can we help you do that? How can we work with you flexibly? You know, is it reducing your hours? Is it changing the times that you work? Is it working from a different office, or whatever it is? Make sure that that's in your policy and then reflected in real life.
And I echo what you said about, you know, the policy, because it is a tick box if it just sits there and it's on the intranet, it's somewhere. Where it's effective is when it helps somebody. So I have coached people who said, I've got a policy at work. What does it say? So it can be a very private journey. So if you're a private person and want to get support, actually having that policy there means you can go away, you can understand what your company does to support you. Depends how robust it is, but if you've got in there about employee assistance programs, for example, you've got your medical health care. If you know where the avenues are, you can get your own. You might have a 24-hour doctor's support wherever you might work. You might be able to get your own support without actually having to involve your employer. But if you've got those benefits, that's always useful. But I think for people that the policy is there if it genuinely makes a difference for them. And for a lot of people, it does. But for those businesses who have a tick box, that's where it doesn't sit right with me, because it's just something that's there. Actually, you know, if you think 10% of women have left the UK workplace because of their menopause, it's affecting a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a staggering statistic. It really is.
Yeah.
Have you found, you mentioned EAPs back there, have they adjusted to include menopause support? Because when I think back, it's been sort of a few years now since I worked at an organisation that had one, but quite often the provisions that were available were like generic. You could have up to X amount of counselling sessions, but have you seen organisations where the EAPs have actually specifically included menopause support, or are they behind the curve on this?
Well, the only one that I know of that does is the one where I'm the menopause expert for them. I haven't seen or heard. So I know that they're offering it, but I haven't seen or heard of one that's been updated personally. I don't know about you, Louise.
Oh, I love that. So you're actually an expert, a menopause expert for an employee assistance program. How did that come about? Did they approach
Reach Us? So it's not a traditional EAP system.
Right.
It's Reach Us is the new, you know, it's brand new this year. He launched in March, I think, Jamie.
Okay.
So I'm the menopause expert within there. And so any company that is signed up for that, their employees don't have to tell anybody. They can come straight to the app and book in a session with me.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. More of that.
Yeah.
And I've worked with organisations that have a training budget. So I've had people come to me who have a certain amount of training budget within their, you know, there we go, brain fog, it's happening. It's real. The benefits package, that's the one. And they had them, I think it was up to 6 sessions. And she came to me and said, I get this. So actually, as long as I invoiced the company, it was paid. But actually, that's like a private, you know, budget that they can do whatever they want with it,
brilliant.
Which is great. But actually, I think it should be more accessible to a lot of people. You know, I used to work for Bupa years ago, and I know they were sort of trailblazers really in terms of getting menopause, sort of private medical insurance support into businesses. But I go back, every single person has a different menopause journey, and that means everybody will have different requirements. And like you were saying about your symptoms, you know, my anxiety and panic got to the point, it was during COVID by then, I couldn't leave the house. And I think, where's that identity gone? Who's that person? When Kirsty and I worked together in London, you know, traveling all over the place, I can't leave the house. My children were 3 and 4. I couldn't get them from school. I was too anxious. All these things, I cannot even imagine myself being like that now, but I was for a very long time. So it's that feeling, isn't it, about, you know, every business. Looking back now, what do I needed? I went to see a counsellor actually about sort of the anxiety, and even I said to her, I think I'm menopausal, and she said, oh, you're a bit young to be menopausal. I look back now and think, well, what would she have known? But that her opinion was important to me looking back. So I think you have to get that right person, like you say, who actually specialises in menopause and also occupational health as well, to say, actually get that right person to support you rather than being dismissed. So, it's quite frustrating when you're on that path and you can't get any answers.
It's really funny. So I'm older than most people that in my network. I don't really know how that happened. It feels like yesterday that people were saying, "Gosh, you're ever so young to be doing a job this senior," and now I'm the old grandma of HR. But anyway, there are loads and loads of women in my network who are perimenopausal, and none of them are my age. So the doctor's still saying you're too young, you're too young, you're too young. It hits in your 40s. That's my experience.
Yeah.
Nearly everybody I know who is perimenopausal is not 50 yet. Like I say, I'm only 52, and I've had these symptoms and things for years. So the doctors need to change their thinking, because it's like, it used to say, oh, it'd be 55. No, that might be when your periods bugger off and you're done and you're through menopause. But perimenopause and menopause are not the same thing. And there can be 10 years between the two. And, someone going like you were in your mid-40s, it's like, it's not too young. It's absolutely not too young.
And this is a conversation that Louise and I had on another panel recently, is that what we should all be talking about is perimenopause, not menopause. Because perimenopause is when all the trouble starts. It's when all the symptoms start, and nobody knows the word. They do now, but there's still millions of women out there that don't know the word.
Because menopause is just literally, once it's all finished.
Menopause is one day, then you're post-menopause for the rest of your life. So we all use this generic menopause term for the whole thing, but actually it's perimenopause for up to 10 to 14 years that you could be feeling like we did. But if you don't know it's coming, and if you've never heard of the word, to go and do the research yourself, because you have to be able to go to your GP and self-advocate. You absolutely need to know what you want when you go to your GP.
And that's something I talk about in my sessions as well, is saying to people, when you go to the doctor, I was totally dismissed. It was a female doctor, and I went back after 18 months. By this time, I'm fed up and angry and I'm not going to be dismissed. And she said to me, go away and do your own research around HRT. Came back all on the phone, and she said, what have you decided on? It's like, oh, I think I need estrogen and progesterone. And then I talk about how I got home with the prescription. I didn't know what I was doing with it. I was Googling, where do I put the gel? What time of the day? I had to go back. And actually, there was a menopause nurse who just started. And I said, and they said, oh, you've got a telephone call. And I said, well, I'm here now. I thought it was face to face. I'm seeing her, assertive me. And I got sorted. I thought, why is this so hard? I'm an intelligent woman. I'm not stupid, but no one's listening to me. It was really just... And also, I should add as well, I still have days where I'm not okay.
Me too.
Vertigo, low mood. Sometimes I think, but I'm kind to myself, that it will pass. That mood, it'll always. But just because we've got HRT, it doesn't mean it all goes away overnight. It doesn't. I'm still perimenopausal now, nearly 6 years in, and I'm 50 in September. So, I think that's important to say. It's okay to not be all right sometimes. So, yeah.
And HRT doesn't work for everybody either. So it isn't always this magic thing that we all think is going to work, because unfortunately for some women, it just doesn't. And some women are intolerant to progesterone, which means they have to stop the estrogen. So it can be a very difficult journey for some women.
Yes, exactly. And I think for me... But I knew when mine was working. So I went to the Children's Sports Day in the July, and I stood there in this field, and I thought, I'm not anxious. And I could have flung my arms in the air. I always liken it to when Nicole Kidman divorced Tom Cruise.
I remember that picture. Yeah.
I can wear high heels again now. Anyway, that's beside the point. Kirsty knows me. Off a tangent. But that's the thing. I remember stood there and I thought, God, I don't feel anxious. And I could have said to me, I'm not, it's working. And I thought, that point in my life, I know exactly where I was. I thought, I'm never going back there again. I'm getting my confidence back. I'm getting myself back. And honestly, when you lose your identity and you're frightened and you're scared and everything else, it's not very nice at all. And I say it happened to me, it could happen to anybody. So
yeah, it's horrible. Let's talk a little bit about the training that you do, Lou, in organizations. Where have you seen the biggest impact with people? What sort of things really, like, how do you tend to address the training, and what has a big impact on line managers?
If we look specifically at line manager, I think for me, I go in with a very respectful HR hat on. So, because I still actively work in HR as well, but I will say to them, look, it's okay that you don't have all the answers. This is a new conversation for everybody. This is what the menopause is. These are the symptoms. So I give them a bit of a training as to what's going on. And then I bring the HR piece into the line management, how to have a conversation, how to prepare. This is what you need to do. These are the sort of things you can do. Make sure you've got time together. So it's respecting the fact that the line managers are nervous. They don't really know what to say. So I think it's the line manager aspect of there, but I've done ones to all employees where it's very much a sort of, this is what the menopause is. I bring my own story into it, and people say they like that because actually, you've been there, done that. But also I've facilitated support groups, and they really do make a difference where you're saying to people, let's have a conversation. So it's all different angles that I work with, but very much it's about getting the message across. And I spoke to a group of CEOs at a conference a couple of years ago, male CEOs. Yeah, and they were actually really, really interested and said, actually, if my wife's not okay, I cannot do my job. I can't travel. I can't, everything goes on. So actually, I think it's about getting that message out there. It's not just about periods, as I say, but actually it's about getting people in the workplace to stay in the workplace and make sure that they get heard. And again, it may be a short-term solution to get them back on track. Encourage them to see the doctor. What support do they have? If they want to go and see the line manager, take a colleague with them, or, get HR involved as well. I mean, I know we're all, in the HR world, but actually HR will want to support. And also they might not have all the answers sometimes as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Let's talk about it from an HR perspective then. So luckily I wasn't working in HR when everything went for me, but you were, Lou. How on earth do you show up as that supportive, reliable, strong HR person when you've left your brain at home and you've come and you don't know what day it is?
I didn't.
Oh.
But if you imagine I didn't know what it was. So I don't mind sharing, I had a parental bereavement September 19, the week my son started primary school. And I lost my mum suddenly, here one day, gone the next. And actually I understand now, was the start of my menopause. And I've had my menopause nurse and another practitioner say that would have started your menopause, the shock of it. So for a long time, they said it would have been the trauma.
Something else I didn't know. A trauma that can
started the menopause for me. So for me, I was thinking it's because I've lost my mum. My company were very supportive. But as I say, a year down the line, I'd been off sick. I'd had months off, work. It was the anxiety and the panic. But if I'd known early on, thinking, because people were very kind, they'd say, well, you might always have this anxiety. And I remember this screaming in my head, thinking, this isn't me. Nobody's listening to me. I could not get any answers. If someone had said to me earlier on, this might be menopause, my life would probably be very different now, And that's the thing. It's as a head of HR, I didn't know it was menopause related. If I'd known what I know now, then I would have got my own support. I would have put my head up and saying, I'm not okay. I need some time out. I need to see my doctor. I need to use the private medical insurance, which ironically I had, but the menopause support wasn't there back then. But I think if I was in that position now, I would think it's okay to not be okay. I think people have said to me, you're an inspiration of what you've been through, and you've got yourself back on track. That actually, if I stood up in front of that senior leadership team now and said, this is what's happened to me, I think I'd probably get a round of applause at the end. And that's not me being full of myself. It's actually people think, wow, she's very open, very honest. And as far as I know, no one's ever judged me and rolled their eyes going, oh, what's she talking about now? Actually, people are interested because of the story I went on. I could not get any answers. And it's a natural part of a woman's life. I think we forget that. Why should we be embarrassed to talk about it? And I think that I only left the workplace 4 years ago, but I think there has been leaps and bounds since. But I think, dare I say, I think you need to have an HR department that is supportive, understanding, and they won't always have all the answers. If no one's experienced the menopause, I had someone say to me, I sailed through my menopause. People do, but they didn't mean it. They just thought, I didn't notice mine. And I'm thinking, well, I'm really struggling here. I'm struggling to go into an office. Everything's scary and frightening and panicky, and I don't get it. But as an HR professional, you're supposed to just, I'm a very private person, or I was, and I worked in HR. And I remember, Kirsty, you and I spoke about it, said, I can't tell my story. I'm too private. Oh, you'll find your voice, Lou. And I did.
Yeah.
But actually, in an HR capacity with your corporate hat on, frankly, no one cares if you're having a bad day. They just want you to turn up and do what you have to do. You don't really have that identity at work. People don't really know who you are. You can't have a bad day in your position. That's how I used to feel.
I was actually told that once. You can't get sick. You're HR. What are we supposed to do if you're sick? Like, okay.
It puts pressure on it. But somebody said to me once, and I worked in London a long time ago, they said, oh, is everything all right? Should we be worried? And I went, what do you mean? She said, well, she said, you're always smiling. You're not smiling today. Should we be worried about our jobs? And I thought, good Lord. You know, honestly, that pressure to be happy all the time. And it went because I was distracted by something. People thought there was something going on and they were worried about their jobs. It puts pressure on you.
It does put pressure on you. I mean, Angela, what are your thoughts around where HR can go for support when they're supposed to be everybody else's support system?
And I think it's difficult. I think it does depend on the size of your organisation. You know, are there other people within HR that you can confide in? Would be my first call. Quite often, I think there is someone on the senior leadership team, if you're a senior role in HR, that you are closer to, that you might be able to confide in. And when I say confide, I don't necessarily mean go and tell them that you're struggling with menopause symptoms. Just go and tell them that you're struggling and that you need some support in some way, and then see where that goes. I think you have to be prepared to be open and honest, and that starts with yourself. Because if you're turning up to work every day and putting your face on, and you will burn out. You will get to that point where you do what I did and Louise did, and we end up leaving because we didn't ask for the support. So my big thing from this is show up for yourself and be honest and admit to yourself that it's okay, that you don't feel okay, and that you're allowed to ask for some help and some support. And you will find it. You will have your people around you. You've just got to be brave enough to show it to them.
It's a great way of putting it. What do you think are the risks of not addressing menopause properly in workplaces? And it could be legal risk, cultural risk, reputational risk. Lou, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to the Fawcett Society report that 10% of women have left the workplace, and they go on to cover a lot of them. So I think there's a risk of losing really key people. If you think, the average age of the menopause is, we use the average age of perimenopause starting at 45. A lot of us have been working 20 years since we left school or university. Think of all that experience that you've got, and they're just stepping away from the workplace. I mean, I do talk to managers, and I said, the average cost of replacing someone, on the top of my head it is, but actually that's when they go, oh, it's numbers. We have to talk in numbers here, because actually, the cost of recruiting and hiring and everything else. But I think for me, it's that person who steps away from the workplace. I remember thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I've never not worked. How has this happened? It's sort of spiraled. And I think it's that feeling you are losing really key people from your workplace, valued people, trusted people. And, there's an answer to it, having a conversation with them to see what they need.
Yeah.
I also think that you've got 1 in 10 women leaving. When they leave, you've got to replace them. And if you're not showing up as an organisation that has a culture that is supportive of their employees, whoever they are, whatever sex they are, whatever age they are, whatever race they are, whatever, you have to be showing that you are supporting everybody within your organisation. And so when they're leaving, if you're not demonstrating that, more and more these days, people are looking for a culture fit. When they go to a job, they're not just going for the salary anymore. That's old school. So if they can't come in and know that they're going to be looked after by you, you're going to struggle to replace these people. So actually it's a much wider problem than losing these individuals. That's the first step, but then replacing them is also going to be a major issue.
Andrew, do you know what, there's something interesting? I was talking to someone recently, and they're job hunting, and they actually said, part of their interview, they say to the company, what menopause support do you have? And I thought, wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
That is a real key part of them getting the right job, is saying I'm menopausal, what do you have in your company? And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
So people are starting to
Isn't
ask
this awful?
about
Like the old-fashioned part of me just went, "Oh, that's brave," but it
how
shouldn't be.
inspirational. Think
It's
actually good for her.
Yeah, absolutely good for
But
her.
that is the sad thing, because that's not the norm yet. But I think
No, I think that's why I
where we're
responded that
going. Wouldn't it be amazing if you'd ever had to ask the question, because all organisations out there just do this because they know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I would say the same about mental health and depression and anxiety and neurodivergency and all of those things. But if there's this whole concept of reasonable adjustments, which I hate that expression. It's just so
clinical, isn't it?
It is really clinical.
It really makes a difference to people. It's that sort of, should I stay or should I go? Actually, if you get the right things in place, you can stay. Brain fog, that feeling.
Just a bit of understanding and accommodation.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's thing about brain fog, and that's as common as hot flushes. But the reasonable adjustments there, well, actually, you've got something coming up where you could, co-work with somebody else on that project or that presentation. Oh, brilliant! That's a reasonable adjustment to that person. It means brilliant. Well, I can get myself through the next 3 to 6 months because I've got that support. It's more simple than it sounds sometimes.
It is. I had a fun kind of double whammy, because at the same time that I kind of crashed with my menopause symptoms, I was going through my ADHD diagnosis as well. And there's some overlap.
Definitely.
There is some overlap. And I can remember when I had my ADHD assessment with a psychiatrist, she said to me, "I want you to give me examples, but let's not do them for the last 5 to 10 years. Can we go back to school? Because I want to rule out that these are just things that have happened during your perimenopause." And so it was like, what are you like with deadlines? Do you leave things to the last minute? And I was like, oh yes, I have examples of that from when I was 7. And so she's like, okay, that one's not perimenopause then. And what about brain fog? And I'm like, that's kind of always been me as well. So it was really weird, because it was for me, like you, Lou, it was the anxiety, and it was depression as well. Anxiety and depression and mood swings were my biggest perimenopause symptoms. All the other stuff is just my ADHD, and I've had that forever. But now learning to work with all of that that's been the 2-year journey of my 50s so far, which is fun. But it's it's self-awareness.
That's the key, Kirsty, and that's what I try to get through to women in their 30s. If you can understand what your normal is now, whether that's around your cycles, whether that's around your emotions and how you feel anxiety, because we all feel anxiety. It's completely normal to get it, and it's healthy to get it. But know what it feels like for you, because if suddenly it starts to get worse, that's a signal that something's going on. And it's knowing who you are as a person right now and how things are changing. And if you're not self-aware enough at the time to start to see the changes happening, the one thing that I see all the time is that we can, even if we know about perimenopause, we're very quick to see it in those around us. We're really slow to recognize it in ourselves, whether it's just that we don't want to admit it, but really slow to recognize it in ourselves.
I'm going to ask you one last question, because I'm conscious of time. What is the one thing that you wish somebody had said or done for you about your perimenopause experience at work? And Angela, I'll ask you first.
It's a tricky one for me, because I wasn't in a standard role. I was consulting when I left. And I'm going to come at it from the working from home hybrid working that's going on. And I think one of the things that would have made a massive difference for me was having a better community of support for me personally, and feeling like I had somebody to talk to, even though I wasn't in the room with anybody else. Now, I'm very much up for working from home, flexibility, hybrid, but you have to have the culture there to give that support, because I was lacking it. Now, I might have been able to carry on in that role if I'd had somebody that I felt I could say I'm struggling, and I did not have that person.
Right.
So for me, I think it does. The big word that keeps coming up in my head as we're talking is communication. We have to be able to communicate easily and fluidly and honestly. And I think if you have that in your team, you're winning.
That's lovely. How about you, Lou?
I think it was the comment, you can't be menopausal, you're not having hot flushes. That put me right off for such a long time. I've never had a hot flush. I get hot sometimes. I've never had one. And when someone said that, so I think they said it with such sort of confidence, I suppose, what I'm trying to say. That actually I thought, oh, well, I'm not then. And actually, I shouldn't have thought, actually, that's because I'm not getting them, it doesn't mean I'm not. And I think that's the thing. It's that lack of education, and it wasn't their fault. I think they were suffering from hot flushes, but actually saying it to me, I thought to myself, well, I'm not then. And then I started thinking, well, why have I got this, and going down this rabbit hole of this anxiety and panic and everything else. But actually looking back now, I was menopausal.
I thought I was losing my mind. I honestly thought I was going.
I did.
So did I.
Yeah. And I didn't feel anybody saw me. It was a uni friend that I met up with after a while, and she looked at me one day and she said, this anxiety isn't you, Lou. And I got so emotional. I just thought, she's looking at me and saying, this isn't you. And I thought, somebody finally is listening to me. No, it takes that one person. And just briefly as well, I had an old school friend phone me, when I was very anxious. She used to come round and take me out. I'd be at home, like looking at the window. Come on, I'd be too anxious to get out of the car. I mean, it's not me. But she said to me one day, and this is probably a good thing to mention actually about the workplace. She was talking to a woman who just started where she worked. And she said, I've had this thing happen to me, blah, 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 blah. And she phoned me up and said, this is what's happening to you. Should I think you're menopausal? And this woman had gone into this business and said, I want to share my menopause story, a powerful story. And she sat there thinking, this sounds like Lou, but the woman's on the other side of it. And that's what happened. So sharing stories really does help people get support.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. There's a really lovely comment from Davith in the chat saying, as a male in the HR department, this was very new to me until a few years ago, but I've purposely tried to educate myself to help employees, but also my friends. And then he talks about being an advocate for training and support, but that is so lovely. And because just the fact that you want to educate yourself, Davith, is lovely, because it's like, it does affect everybody. And you're not going to go through life as a male without experiencing a female that going through this. So,
and to anyone in HR watching this, I would say, don't assume that if you're going to do a lunch and learn or training, don't assume it's just for the women. Because whenever I do training or lunch and learn, whatever it is, and the men come, it's quite often the men that ask the most questions.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So we, at the Evolving HR conference in November, we had a panel discussion, and the title of it was, I'd rather take a bullet than do menopause training. And I deliberately asked two chaps to be on the panel, one who I know his wife was experiencing perimenopause and had real problems at work, and the other who I knew was a huge advocate for employee well-being of all kinds and has done he works in the construction industry, and he's done loads for women in construction. So I deliberately asked it, and there was some people were a little bit sniffy about it on the day, going, why has she got men on the panel? And I said, deliberately, because it affects them too. It affects everybody. And we're not talking about my menopause symptoms. We're talking about how it affects people at work, and you're going to encounter that. So thank you. I noticed you've both put your LinkedIn profile links in the chat. So if people watching this want to connect, there's your details in the chat there. Do reach out to Angela or to Lou if you feel like you need any support or any kind of specialist conversations in your organizations, or even for yourselves. And ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. As I say, every single time, I could have carried on talking about this for hours because I always can. Always choose topics that I'm interested in. So yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. I will get the recording uploaded to the app tomorrow, and then it will be available for people to watch the replay. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Enjoy your long weekend when it comes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us, Kirsty.
Thank you.